Hello, I'm Craig Seibert, and I'm here with Misty, Stephen, and Phil, our regular group of people, all in one video. And we're the hosts of Meet Me at the Table. It's a podcast that focuses mainly on Christianity and how it's lost its personal connection to people. But we want to leave the table open to discuss other areas as well. And we tackle issues like women in leadership roles in the church, acceptance of those in the LGBTQ plus community, or racial indifferences. We set the table for all sides to be heard and in a respectful manner.
Yes. So before we go into today's topic, I kind of want to segue to, since this is our real first time all being together. Phil, how you doing?
Steve.
Any major updates or anything going on that you would like to talk about?
Nothing major. Well, I guess just personal news. I completed my very first full sleeve tattoo sleeve.
Oh,
I saw the post on that.
Yeah. So I should be getting some really good photos here in the next couple of weeks of that. But that's my first ever sleeve, and now I want to do my next arm, and I feel the debt increasing. So
I know about that.
Are we coloring in, or are we leaving black?
No, so this I think I'm going to stay black and white or black and gray on both sides, even though this one has a little red dot. But
yeah, oh my god,
their video, like skip, play, pause.
That's awesome.
That kind of stuff. Yeah,
tattoos are awesome. So expensive, as we all know, but that's awesome. That's a good update. That's a good update. One day we'll be there. I thought that I was done until my friend said these dots that are here. And if you're not watching on YouTube, go to YouTube to see our sleeves. But they said that this does not count. So I have to fill those in because I have to make it count. So they will one day be filled in. But awesome. Misty, how about yourself? Any update? How are you doing?
It's been a rough few weeks, to be perfectly honest. Craig will probably echo this sentiment, but we've had some ongoing family issues with our son. And, if you're out there and you're the praying type, that we could really use some good juju right now for some resolution with all of that. It's teenagers.
Yeah.
Enough said.
15 and anxiety do not go together well at all.
Oof.
We're talking about
I'm pretty sure I was a perfect teenager.
Yeah,
I had no emotions. I obeyed my parents so well. Like,
didn't sneak out or didn't go any weird places or anything like that.
Stop, his mom ain't listening.
Never.
I was perfect. We all know.
Yeah, I never took my parents' car on Sunday night when they were at Sunday school. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening.
So that my parents were where it was a manual, so it was easy. You could just push it as far as you needed and then just jump in and pop start it. So pretty easy. I mean, not that I did that. I'm just saying it was. So Stephen, how are you doing? How's things going for you?
Things are good. This time of year is really busy for me. We got my wife's birthday. We got our anniversary of when we got married, my daughter's birthday, and then our anniversary when we dated. So much happening. But you know what? It's a great time of the year. Just so much. Don't look at me that way. You always have to celebrate the day that you're starting to date as well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Have to.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, tthank you.
So the subject of the day is
yeah. Well, before we go on, Craig, how are you doing? Any update? How are you doing?
Just same as you. It's been really busy, and like Misty said, it's been really a rough 2 weeks dealing with trying to help our son. I mean, he's going through a lot at this age, and trying to find help right now is just almost impossible.
Oh my goodness. It's a nightmare.
You're looking at a 2 to 3, sometimes 6 month lead time to talk to a psychologist or psychiatrist.
Oh, goodness.
Out there. So it's really kind of hard to get him help he needs immediately, unfortunately. So
you guys look into like virtual,
even virtual. We found a couple local that were willing to do it, but some of them are still even 2 to 3 weeks out. Even for virtual, which is odd. So, but yeah.
I mean, I guess if you think about it, maybe it's a good thing that it is taking two things. Maybe it's a good thing that it's taking that long because people are actually going to therapy and getting psychiatrists and all that stuff. But it's a sad thing because there's not enough people to be able to help that stuff. So,
right.
Two things there. But yeah, the topic of this episode. So last episode, if you've not been able to listen to Lola Robbins' story, go ahead and listen to that to her story. But we asked her a question. Me and Misty asked her a question, which was, "What is church?" And I have been pondering this question a lot lately. Since leaving, really, in quotation marks, the church. Again, I still listen to a church virtually, but leaving the actual physical building of a church. And again, since this, I've been told that virtual is not really church. What is church? So I've been pondering this question, and I kind of wanted to pose this question to you three, and then just have an open dialogue in this table. So let's start with you, Phil. What is church to you?
I mean, yeah, that's a question I've had to, obviously that was like one of our first things we had to like tackle when we left church, was like, what does even church mean to us at this point? Because we did take like a conscious step back from like church culture in general. So like we kind of took a break from like even watching sermons and that kind of stuff. So it took more time to like read books and find information on your own kind of strategy. So like kind of starting to consider maybe a church environment. Like I've been thinking, like, does it have to be this building that we have to go to every week to just kind of get a refresh? Like, to me, church just kind of feels like this weekly refresher where then you're kind of then guilted into spending more time and more money to this thing that is mainly just to kind of benefit your personal faith and to help other people in the community if that church is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So but I also see the Bible when it talks about where two or more are gathered, that's where the body of Christ is. So like for me, like even right now, like our podcast of Meet Me at the Table, this is a form of church. I believe we're fellowshipping together, talking through things that are important to each of us and other people that we feel is important to other people. So and it's beneficial for everybody. And I think that's what God ultimately is striving for us to have, is a community of people that are helping each other and helping other people outside of that community. And I don't know if we should put church in such a strict box, square shaped building box. You know what I mean?
Which is something you kind of mentioned in your Everyone Has a Story too, about the box and stuff. And it's interesting you say that this right here, this dialogue right here is fellowship, or is the church, because it's kind of what Lola Robbins had said, this is church right here. And that's something that really struck me. Even though like I completely agreed with her, I don't think I had thought about that this is church until she said that. I was like, oh yeah, wow, this could be church.
Well, you're helping someone. You're helping someone through faith. So
trying to.
Trying to, yes.
And even myself, I think this is, again, I mean, I don't know, you all can either agree or disagree with this. Like, maybe sometimes this podcast is for myself as well, to be able to grow and learn and understand and hear people. Again, we're not here to be this grand podcast that goes, I'm sweating, man. But this grand podcast that goes big. We're here really just like we're enjoying this time of just being able to hear people's story. But Craig, I was about to say something.
Well, one of the things that you pointed out, Phil, is something that I feel gets glossed over way too much. That verse of when two or more people meet, and you take that to the lowest common denominator. He says two. He doesn't say when 5 or more people meet or when 15 or more people meet. He says two. So that means that when I call Stephen or we talk on just when you and I went to breakfast, when you asked me to go meet you for breakfast and we sat down, that's what I consider church or helping.
And it felt great.
Or meeting. Yeah. And like I said, good.
Before you go on that, and again, I know I mentioned this last podcast, when we discuss, when you and me went out to eat, 90% of the time when someone in the church says, let's meet up, it is, I'm going to convince you that you're wrong. When me and Craig went out, Craig was asking me how I was doing and just listened. And we just talked about life. We talked about the Bible. We talked about our journeys in the church and stuff. And it was no convincing that I was wrong. It was saying, hey, I'm validating your hurt. Here's this. It's not like, hey, you need to change. Like, this is what we need to become more accustomed to, of when we're in the church, or when we're, let's just say when we're in the church building and we're reaching out to someone saying, hey, let's meet up. Let's meet up and actually just listen to people or talk to people, not convince them that they're wrong.
I think that ability to ask questions, even if you might not have the popular opinion in a judgment-free zone, should be part of whatever a church is.
Yeah.
Well, I'll drop the bomb back on Phil and ask, so do we need a church? I mean, do we really need the politics behind what a church is today?
Yeah.
Or do we redefine it, and do we put all of ourselves in 2 or more and just leave it at that?
The only way I can think of answering that is like, it's a 2-parter. Yes, we need the church. Do we need the church that we have made it out to be now? Absolutely not.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I know Jesus also met in the temple and outside of the temple, but at the same time, when he was in the temple, he was trying to use the temple in a more effective way than the Pharisees were, because he wanted to actually witness to people in the temple, not just take people's money like the Pharisees did. So like when you try to defend the, say like, we don't need church, and people say, well, even Jesus met in the church, but he did, but you're kind of just like glossing over the like overarching like goal of Jesus's mission in the temple. Like, it wasn't just for him to go to church and,
he went to
hang out,
church,
have donuts and coffee at the social hour. Like, it was
exactly. He went to a church and then he met. It wasn't going to a church to meet. He was going to a church and then he met with people.
Exactly.
Well, I don't want to totally dismiss there are some people that church is going to a building on Sunday morning with 100 other people and listening to a worship band and watching a preacher give a sermon. And, I think that that's still quote unquote church for a lot of people. And they may not have any desire to change that, because that's how they get their connection or fulfillment.
Yeah. And the modern church today does not foster a good individual relationship with God. Like, they don't encourage a faith that really hinders on your own personal relationship with God. Like, they always have yes, it's a personal relationship, but you need to, make sure you're tithing, but you need to make sure you're serving in the church, being the hands and feet, all that kind of stuff. So like, me leaving church has actually boosted my relationship, because I feel like I'm making the relationship more about me and God instead of me and the church and God, and like how that all, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's
big.
Where I'm at.
That's big. And I want to go back to that maybe before, maybe at the end of this episode, like, of where, like, hey, now that we've kind of all left the church, what have we seen? But before we do that, I think one thing that's interesting is that you brought up the Bible verse about when there's 2 or more. In my notes, I had told actually Missy yesterday I was going to look in the Bible about Bible verses that support about the church. And I started doing that today. I took about 30 minutes of starting to dive in what the Bible actually says about church. And as I started going and running down things, I said, fuck this. I'm not a theologian. If I start talking about what the Bible says about church, people are going to be coming at me and saying, that's not actually what the Bible says. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So I went back and I said, you know what? I just wrote down when there are 2 or more. Because to me, that's really what church is. We can talk about what church is and what church is this and that and that. But the biggest thing I started Googling was that the actual first church that was known about in history was about 200. It was about around 200 after Christ was death. That was like the first known church was out of like Jordan. Prior, it was always talked about temples, not really churches. So the modern day church, the first modern day church, was known about 200 years after Christ's death. Where have we evolved since then, and where can we go back? It seems like in the church, when Jesus was speaking with, the disciples were speaking with people, it was more in like, at least the way I saw it in the Bible, it was always in the open, or it was about on a mountain, or it was in other areas. It was out in the open. It wasn't an actual physical church building. So let's kind of go to that. What do you think the church, and Phil or Craig, you kind of dismissed it. What do you think the church really should look like today? If it's not a building, what should the church look like today? And if anybody wants to join on this.
Well, I think that's going to come back around to, we might need another episode, to defining what a pastor is. Because if you've got somebody standing at the front and who is educated, who has been through seminary school, who has studied and spent his time in churches, I think that's leading a church. Well, I'm not sure if you can break it down to, let's have a meeting of 5 people and then 1 pastor. I don't know if there's enough pastors out there to do that kind of thing. And I fear that my idea is to grab 5 or 6 people and put them in a group, and those 5 or 6 people are, live with each other and share lives with each other and talk with each other and pray with each other. And it's small groups. We've, if we've all been at a church, we know what the small groups are. But I think the separation away from the building and putting those 5 or 6 people together without a pastor is also a dangerous route. It's a route where they're, they may be able to study on their own, but then there's really kind of no one to guide them. So I don't know, that's maybe you have to come back to see leaders, who's the leaders, where the disciples were going out and talking to people. That kind of stopped after a certain point. And then they just started writing letters, and then just started sending messages to people and telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing, and trusting the people in those regions. And they kind of got out of hand, as you saw with a lot of Paul's letters and stuff. So I don't know. I think if you're going to reform the church, you kind of got to reform the structure as well, from top down. That's just how I feel about it.
That's good. Well, that's good. I agree. I mean, I don't think I could live with 5 other people. I couldn't do that.
2 or more is what you need.
I got my wife. I got my kids. So we got 5 here. Yeah, I'm good.
You have a church. Good job, Stephen.
I built, people always joke like you're building your own soccer field. I'm building our soccer team. I'm building my own church right now, and I'm good. I got 2 or more, 5 total. We're good. Phil, what about yourself? What do you think? Like, modern day church, how do you think it should be structured, or what do you think, what do you think?
Oh my goodness.
No pressure, Phil.
Man. See, that's tough because it makes, I've had good discussions about, Steve, you made a good, not Steve, Craig, you made a good point about not Steve, sorry. I've done more episodes with you, Steve, technically, one more. I don't know why that makes it harder for me to remember. So we talked about, you said, a small group of 5 people that are leading a church, that kind of, don't, how it could be dangerous to not have that kind of guidance in that kind of scenario. And it brought up the question of okay, so should churches technically run under denomination? So they have that guideline, that, that kind of plumb line of where they should, because I think non-denominational churches, the what we see today is kind of what started this downward spiral of seeing this Christian nationalism that we're seeing. Because even though the non-denominational churches here in Des Moines, a lot of them favor the SBC, kind of doctrines a little bit, but they kind of are able to pull themselves away enough to be we're non-denominational. We don't really we just, and it allows for a lot of weird things to happen that really don't happen in other denominations. Not obviously Catholicism and all that stuff has their issues with abuse and all this kind of stuff, but it's just then you got to tackle, okay, what denomination is technically has the correct process that is more beneficial to people's faith, and there's so many variables to what would make a good church, or what church should be today. And I always come back to it. I just feel it's a personal thing to digest of what does church mean to me. And then I think a modern church should be able to accept people without having to try to force them into a certain type of faith, if that makes sense. Because I feel like churches are too focused on making sure you're practicing your faith in the way we practice our faith, because you go to this church because you need to fall in line there. It doesn't really foster people people who deconstruct are often pushed away because we start questioning this or that and this and that. And so churches don't really allow for that kind of environment. And I think I think the modern church should be really more accepting of people's doubts and questions and just allowing them to run with those when they need to, and not be so focused on get back like you're gonna hurt yourself kind of thing. So yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know, that was like my weird roundabout way of trying to answer that.
No, I think it's tough. It's tough for churches because I think a lot of times they, as we've seen, they pinpoint to Bible verses and they go, this is the way. So like they look at doubting Thomas and he doubted so many things and they go, well, so if we have the deconstructing community, they're doubting, so they're just wrong. No, we're just questioning things of, I don't know how deep we want to go in this conversation, but when you look at someone that's a MAGA supporter, and again, I can say this because I was a MAGA supporter. I voted for the man the first term. And I finally, thank God, I opened up my eyes and saw the issues there. But when you have somebody that's just so focused and pinpointed on one thing, you open your eyes and you see, where am I going with this? Doubting Thomas. Sorry. Give me a second. I sometimes go in a rant and I don't know where I'm going. But we're here. We're back on page 10. Misty, what about yourself? What do you think that the church really should be structured like? Phil was just talking about, I never even thought about that though, about the whole, non-denominational kind of, I don't know. When he said that, I was like, wow, non-denominational really is a denomination. Like, I feel like that's just like one of those things, like it's just like one of those things, like we're not denominational. We have no really.
Are you denomination?
No, yes. We're not a denomination. We're not.
We're agnostic to dominations.
We're nothing. We're nothing. But sometimes saying nothing, again, as we've realized, when you say nothing, you actually are saying something. But so, Misty, what do you like this modern day church? If we could take away this shit that we've had, what do you think what do you think really the church should look like?
Well, I think first of all, no matter what you are looking for in a church, you should be able to find. There's still going to be a group of people out there that share your beliefs, share the structure that you want, and have a place or a meeting or a venue, some sort of avenue to believe and worship in that manner. I think that's the most important thing first. Personally, church is two things to me, and neither of them have to do with a building. Church is community, and church is me and God. It's my relationship with them, him, her, they, them. It's not me in a church, like one of you guys said earlier. So, I think that, I don't know if anybody here has attended a Unitarian service. Anyone?
No. Jeremy,
no, I've been hearing that.
Yeah.
My brother Jeremy, who was on the episode, talked about it.
Yeah, I think that, and please, I'm coming from a place of ignorance. I have not attended myself, but I think in the research that I've done, they're doing something right in that they are inviting everyone of all faiths, of all walks, of all experience and wanting for a relationship with the spiritual into their place of worship to commune and to do things for the community and create relationships with each other, whether you're on the same page or not. And I like that idea for church. I think that should be what a church is, regardless of what denomination or non-denomination you are. So
actually, Misty, I wanted to ask you a question about church in terms of like how you view it as a woman, because the church is notorious for patriarchal just viewpoint. Like, men are the leaders, women. So I said the quiet part out loud. I am so sorry.
Hey,
hold on. Women are to submit respectfully to the men, and
I'm sorry, what was that, white man? I didn't hear you.
Yes, sorry, let me Okay. All right. But no, like,
no, really, what was your question? I'm sorry.
No, so like that really has interested me lately of like, because that was like some of my first questions when I started getting into deconstruction was like, why aren't women pastors? Why can't like I don't see this weird disconnect of men and women like they draw it out in churches. And so like what kind of connection do you get to a church when you're treated in that type of way? Because for me, a white man going to church, I always felt very welcomed and just, because it's kind of designed around me technically. So it's going to benefit me the most. You know what I mean? Like, so like, what's your experience with that?
Yeah, that was that's a great question. Thank you so much, Phil. When we were going through the membership classes at our previous church, which is where we met Stephen, there were two things that came up. And one was the church's views and acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community and women in service. And, of course, the answers were very fluffy, as they usually are, very non-confrontational. But, the ultimate answer was that women aren't allowed to teach in those roles. To be honest, at the time, I just accepted it and moved on because I didn't know anything else. I've never really attended a church where it was invited or accepted, with the exception of very, very small, a couple of very small churches we, in the meantime. But, I never, because I wasn't personally trying to be in that role, like I just accepted it. So the longer we were there, the more it bothered me, especially going to school for theology. And I was actually invited to teach at another church that we had attended for one sermon, which was, awesome. But it wasn't, I knew that wasn't going to be a career path for me, but it wasn't really one I desired. And so I felt like I was there to serve in whatever role they accepted me. And I was okay with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. Cause I've also felt like times of like, I just got to accept it for what it is. And like, that's the only choice we have. And that happens a lot in evangelical spaces. It's just like, this is the way it is, and kind of get in line or get out. And so, but yeah, just that's just
it
interesting.
Wasn't personally affecting me, and so I just let it go.
Sure,
but
sure,
that's unfortunate, and that's really sad.
It is unfortunate.
It's sad because like imagine how things would be different if you didn't just have to accept. Well, I'm not really welcomed in this corner, so I'm just going to accept that. Like imagine if you wanted to be in that corner and you're not able to because you just have to accept the fact that you can't be a pastor or you can't be this. But why? Like. I don't get it. In the episode that me and Craig did with Kelly Matlock of Icon Church, I made a comment of saying like, "Where's the cutoff in women leadership? Like, where really is the cutoff?" Because I went to a Christian school and I was predominantly taught by women, so that's okay. Mm-hmm. That's okay for kids to be taught by women about biblical things, by Bible things. I can't recall now. Again, I can't recall in high school being taught by a woman in Bible class. But again, for the most part, every class, even math and all that stuff, there was biblical ties somewhat brought into those classes, and it was taught by women. So again, like, where's the cutoff? So once now, I've now reached puberty, so like that's okay. But now when I'm an adult, like once I'm hit 21, now I can't be taught by a woman in a church. I know this is a rant, but it's like, it's really to me confusing of where the cutoff for women in the church is okay. Because again, it's okay for kids up to maybe 18 to be taught by a woman. But above that, it's not okay. And then when we look at the Bible times, like David was, what did they say? Like he was like 12 or 13 when he went up against Goliath. He was technically in the Bible terms an adult. I don't know. To me, it's just so confusing where the cutoff is for men to be taught by women. And sorry for that rant.
I can also tell you that, like, you know, even though that wasn't a role that I necessarily desired, the roles that I did play on the worship team or serving in the children's ministries and stuff, my opinion was very dismissed. I was easily just kind of pushed aside. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, I don't always have the best approach with those opinions, but regardless, you don't have to vouch for
I was vouching for
it. But regardless, it was still very dismissive.
I'm only smiling because of me too. Like, I do not have the best approach on things too. And, but yeah, that's good.
I guess the advantage to that is that I never took it personally. I just chalked it up to being a woman and moved on. So I'll take that. I wish I wouldn't have for so long, but at the time I did.
Yeah. As a newly like feminist person, like just chalking up to just being a woman, it's just part of being like, that is like just so fascinating for me to learn all those new experiences of like, that's just part of being a woman. I'm like, wow, like it just blows my mind every single time. Like it blows my mind. And
but
like
that's interesting. That right there is interesting. Like, why can't people just sometimes take a step back and go, let me put myself in that person's shoes, that race's shoes, that woman's shoes, or whatever. Let's just say that trans shoes, like just to be able to put yourself in the person's shoes and say, what are they going through? Instead of just going, oh, well, they're just bitching because of their political views. And again, this is just first world problems here in America. But like, again, like that's like, we should be doing that. We should be putting ourselves in other people's shoes to be able to say, what are they going through? Okay, this woman that just spoke up during church, she shouldn't have done that, number one, because I'm not saying that's what I say, but that's what most people say. Like, put yourself in their shoes instead of just saying that. Like, why are they having issues with this? We don't question when a man does that. A white man.
I think
let's be honest. We don't do that.
I think that is the fundamental basis for the church that needs to change. And that is that there is already, before anybody walks through the door, an established hierarchy. And they treat everybody as such. Before they get to know you, before they know where you are on your walk, where you are with your faith, what you want out of church, why you're there, you are immediately put into a box, and you're meant to stay in that box.
From the moment anything outside of that,
outside of that, though, is not acceptable.
And what's the point of saying a church is accepting of everybody? They want to bring everyone in. They want to be a diverse church, but then they also have an application process, a new members class, and you have to have a nice little conversation with your pastor just to make sure you're all, melting together. Because
that's good.
I mean, like, I just came from a church that was all about openness and all this kind of stuff, and they had literally a 6-month waiting period after you went to this new member class, and you had to have all these like meetings with elders and pastors and stuff. I'm like, don't you just want me as a member? Like, what's this whole rigmarole I need to go
through?
I'm
not trying to be a disciple right here. Like, I'm just trying to be a member. I'm just trying to go to church. I'm just trying to learn about Jesus. I heard from somebody recently that they were trying to become a member of church and they had to be voted in. And that to me was interesting.
That is, what do they call that? I had the name for it a long time ago. Now
short answer is wrong.
It's wrong.
It's
every decision is voted on. Yeah,
it's survivor-ish. It's just interesting. It's interesting to me that that's just accepted.
Garb. It's a garb. It's a garb type church.
I would have to Google what that means.
It's usually like a very vote-based church where everybody votes on decisions. So.
I'm curious if the women get to vote equally with the men.
Ooh, I can ask.
I'm gonna guess no, but
I can ask. I will ask. I will ask, and following, I will let us all know this. That's a good question. That's a good question. Now, Craig, you've been sitting there for a little bit. What do you think?
Well, I've been sitting here a little bit because
I know you're thinking.
I honestly think I've been thinking about this the wrong way. I think when we were talking about denominations, that something clicked. That I don't know if we should be trying to change the church. I don't know if we should be trying to change what they're doing right now. I think we should just start forming the churches that fit what we think the church should be in our ideal. And then that would either make those churches be more visited, more people attending, more people worshiping, and it would draw away from those ones that are doing it the wrong way. Or B, we would find out that maybe it's not the right way. Maybe it's not either the time for it to start changing, or maybe it's just not the right way to go. But I think I've been thinking about this whole thing about churches is going in and restructuring them and taking away their core beliefs, and maybe they need to open up their core beliefs or start looking at documentation on their core beliefs being wrong. And instead, I think maybe it just needs to evolve, and through evolution, you're creating something new, and that new thing either lives or it dies. And I think I've just been thinking about it the wrong way. I think I've really kind of put too much emphasis on changing what they're doing. And I think Phil said it best, there's a bunch of different denominations out there. And when you start, coming too far off, you do lose some of the structure. Well, then take that as a learning tool. If you've seen denominations that have spread too far, maybe that's not the direction you go. Maybe you come somewhere in the middle. But I think Misty's right, though. It has to be accepting. You have to start from the foundation of creating a new church as being accepting of everyone. Every single person that comes to the door is exactly equal, their level. So I don't know. That's what I've been thinking, is just maybe I've been totally thinking about this whole restructuring of a church the wrong way, that it just needs to be something else and see if that's going to survive and do it the right way.
Well, it's funny. Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I was going to say, in terms of thinking of restructuring, the big last restructure we had in Christianity and in religion was back when Martin Luther put the letters up on the doors of the church.
Yep.
What when you think about what a freaking simple way of challenging the Catholic Church and the nobility and all that stuff that was going on. He just put up a letter and let people read it, and it shook everything. Yeah. So it makes me think of what's a simple way that we can shake evangelical Christianity or the churches that we see that we think are toxic. I think the modern tools we have, social media and all this stuff, when we're exposing Greg Locke and Hillsong Church and all this corruption that we're seeing, as much as people that are really dedicated to those spaces hate it, they ultimately I feel they think yeah, that's probably not very good. They do the it's a few bad apples kind of thing. But they agree that these are bad things, and so we continually push that. We continually push, this is wrong. We all can agree this is wrong, and this person is trying to push it off as holy or as of God. So that's kind of my thought on how do we restructure church. I think it's just challenging what we see as an issue and just make it known, because otherwise if we just leave and just kind of huddle into our own little relationship and faith, and part of deconstruction for a lot of people, including me, is I don't want to convert people. I'm just here to accept people for who they are, listen to their side. I'll tell you what I know, and then that's it. I'm not forcing, I don't want to convert people. And so I think if we take that same attitude towards the church, we don't want to convert you guys to our way of thinking. We just want to show you a better way of
what it's done for you, what your belief has done for you. And that's, I hate, what's the term you use when you say what your faith has given you? It's called, you stand up and, when you stand up in front of everyone and tell everyone
your testimony.
Your testimony. So I think that
with a T.
But you're right. It's a really good point. And I think that when you're bringing people into a church or into a place where they're going to, be fed the word or listen to music, that your testimony really should be all it is. You're saying, what has he done for my life? I'm not trying to convert you, not trying to tell you that this is the way you should go, but I'm just telling you that this is what's happened in my life. If you want to read about it, great. If you want to just sit and listen, have a nice day. Enjoy it.
That's so funny because to me, it sounds like what churches always told us in the first place is that if you let that little light shine, people will be drawn to you. And it's kind of like that, except for without the judgment and the toxicity and the inequality and the bullshit. So yeah, let that light shine. I like that.
Let that light shine.
Hand out them $100 gospel tracts.
I can sing it for you if you'd like. This little light of mine. Okay.
I hate those so much.
My kids sing that. And
Get my guitar if you want to do it.
My kids sing that song, and I'm like, I mean, like, I still like smile when they sing it because like it's something I did as a kid too, and like it is cute. But like every time like I listen to a Christian song now, like completely deconstruct it. I'm like, all right, let's think about this. Like, what does this actually mean? Like, am I teaching them something wrong by allowing them to sing? Or not allowing. I don't want to say allowing, but like letting them like continue this. But sorry, while you were talking though about non-denominational, or saying like let's look at like kind of reconstructing the church, I googled what when the non-denominational church kind of began, because I was like, maybe that's when the non-denominational church, and in what I thought was that the non-denominational church started like 20 years ago. Not really, but like recently. It was the 18th century. That was a long time ago. It was a long time. I didn't know that. I honestly did not know the history of the non-denominational church because I grew up Baptist, and around 15 went to a non-denominational church, but still didn't really know the history because I didn't really care about it. So it's very interesting that it really was not that long ago. But then also thinking about that and hearing Craig and Phil talk about like all the denominations, it's like interesting to think about like how Christians always saying it's so easy to get to Christ. There's only one way to Christ, but we have fucking 1,000 denominations for people to go through, 1,000 different fucking Bibles for people to read. And it's so confusing. We do not make it easy. There's so many different translations of what these verses mean to be able to get to Christ, when all this man is just saying is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then when we try to love ourselves, it's vain. How dare you love yourself? How dare you look at yourself and love yourself? Sorry, this is a major tangent, but this is something that I've been really bothered with recently. Just seeing people struggle with self-image problems. It's like, you got to love yourself. You cannot love Christ until you love yourself. You have to embrace your beauty. You have to embrace you before you can even love your neighbor, because God, that's what God specific. That's what Jesus said, is to love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. You have to love yourself. Major tangent. I love you guys. So as Phil already alluded to, and I said I wanted to kind of conclude this with this episode, is now we've kind of all walked away from the church building. None of us, unless things have changed in the last week, none of us have attended a church building at least in a while. What have we learned? What have we learned? Like, what has it been good? Has it been bad? Again, we're not here to try to say, hey, F the church, don't go to the church. That's not really our mission. Our mission is not that. Our mission is really just to talk and have a discussion and say, like, this is what we've learned. This is what we've seen. This is what we've grown from. So I want to start with you, Craig, because you're to my left, and I'm going to read from my left to my right. Craig, what have you learned from since leaving the church building? What have you learned?
I think it's a double-edged sword for me. I think Phil mentioned it really well with denominations sometimes getting too far away. I think that your microphone's falling, Stephen. I think that I've drifted far away in certain things, and I kind of started this journey with bringing myself a little bit closer, but I think I'm drifting a little bit further away. But I'm also learning a lot more. I'm learning a lot more of what what my core beliefs before may have been tainted by the church I was in and the parents that I grew up with, and not saying anything bad about them, but they had a certain belief. So I'm learning a lot about my history and everything, but I feel like I'm drifting a little bit further away, not having that community. So that's what I've really kind of learned from being away from the physical church itself.
Well, that's good. One thing I think me and you, Phil, can share this, because I think we've somewhat discussed this. One thing that's really hard during this deconstructing is feeling of, I feel like we've discussed this. If we haven't, sorry, but, and if you don't agree with this, just let me know. One thing that is really tough in deconstructing, and if any of you agree with this, is feeling of disappointing your family or disappointing your parents, because it is how you were raised. You're raised one way of you need to abide by this. That is one thing that I have struggled with is not wanting to disappoint your family, because you feel like you want to follow the steps that your parents provided for you, because you do look at your child and go, I was raised properly. And one thing when I was speaking with my mom about it, I said, God had intended for Adam and Eve to obey, and they didn't, but he found another way for them, and he still loved them. And he went with it. And Mom, Dad, maybe I'm not obeying what you had intended for as a kid. You wanted me to follow the exact way, going to church every single Sunday and be able to tell my kids, when my kids grow up, they'd be able to say the same thing. I don't remember a Sunday that I didn't go to church. I went to church every Sunday during COVID too. I was faithful to God. But you know what? To me, that's not church. Church, I wasn't getting anything from church. It reached a point of where I felt like church needed me more than I needed church. And I know I texted you all that, and I felt so narcissistic saying that church needed me more than I needed church. But it really is true. Like if I was to continue to go to church, it was bringing more harm to my family, because I was so fucking frustrated going to every Sunday and being behind those curtains and seeing the shit, hearing people talk shit about everybody that walked through those doors, and hearing people say, I wish that I can speak up. I wish I could speak up for the Black Lives Matter people. I wish I could speak up for the LGBTQ, but I can't, because I'm in this certain position. I can't do it. I can't do it because then I will no longer lead. I did it. And listen, I will tell you, it will lead you to no longer being in Team A. I'm just letting you know. You won't be in it. But I had to leave. And once I left, I'm telling you, yes, it's so stressful, because you're leaving that comfort of understanding that your parents are so proud of you. You're leaving that comfort of knowing that your best friends that you've had forever will probably leave you. And I will tell you, they will leave you. 90%. I laughed about this on my anniversary. 90% of the people that were at my fucking wedding, I don't talk to anymore. Why? Because I don't go to church anymore. Not that I don't talk to them. I would still talk to them. Most of them are friending me from Facebook.
I know you're going around the horn, and wanted to kind of get our opinions on what we felt like after we left. That led you into what you just said. But now I'm going to turn it back on you. I'll make you next. What did you learn? God. What have you learned?
I've learned a lot. I've learned that I'm still trying to figure out the whole church thing. That is something that is really tough. One thing that I've learned is that church does not have to be a building. I have learned more virtually. Let's just say this. My last Sunday listening to a virtual church, we talked about how Lizzo brought me to church more than anything. That was in the church service. They said that the pastor said,
"About damn time, Stephen."
Right? That's what I did in the group text. I did that in the group church text with the congregation. Unfortunately, damn was censored out. And I said to the pastors, what just happened? And they laughed. But they said, the pastor said, I'm singing it with you. So I have learned a lot, that the fact that you don't have to enter a building to get close to God. And while, yes, the comfort, like when you're going to a building and you have a set schedule, you're able to stick to that schedule because you're going to that church building. And to me, again, it's another manipulative tactic, because you don't want to be that person that doesn't go on a Sunday and someone bash you and say, oh, I didn't see you. Sorry, I don't know what to say. Yeah. And then you keep going because you don't want to feel awkward not going those Sundays. Listening virtually, I don't feel that way anymore. I have missed certain Sundays, and people know where I'm at because they follow me on social media and they see that I'm on vacation, and I don't have to attend those Sundays. I do listen, I'm able to listen back in those things. So I've learned, again, I think the biggest thing for me to answer that question is that it's not a building. It is not a building. And when that person on Facebook, this pastor that posted about this saying, they were talking about church, and they listed all those things about what church can be, and they left out virtual. And I responded, said, "Hey, you forgot virtual." And he said, "No, I don't think that's a way of church." That really bothered me, because I felt like you were kind of discrediting my faith. Like, you were discrediting.
What year is it? Because
2022.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like, think about it. Like, if Jesus had the capability of using technology back then, don't you think they would use it? And like, now we're here, and just because, like, and again, I mentioned this too, like, my church that I'm listening to virtually, now that they're back into a in-person basis, they asked the virtual platform, how can we continue to keep you in this community? I've tithed once since going to this church in 6 months. To me, that felt like this was not about money. And that was the first time in my church life of feeling that this was not about money. They asked me, how can we keep you here? And I was like, you're in Texas. I'm in Maryland. Why do you care about me? Why do you care about me?
I don't understand. So what you're saying is that there are people on the other side of that computer screen that are invested in who you are instead of what you can contribute to their organization?
Especially in Texas. I was shocked.
Yeah.
All I know about Texas is it's red and it's about cowboys.
Okay.
Both are enemies to me. I'm just kidding.
Bring it back in.
I'm just kidding.
Since I kind of took over the what's next, or what did you learn? Misty is next, or Phil? You want to flip?
Yeah. So if I go to left to right, so in the right where I'm sitting, I was in the middle of Craig and Misty, so that was perfect. So let me ask Misty. I'm really not, but Misty, what about yourself?
Oh, yeah. The honestly, the biggest thing that I have learned is that God, it's freeing. My relationship with whatever higher power is out there is so much better now that I don't have an obligation to people to justify it. I don't have to show up at a certain time, at a certain place, and perform a certain operation and give a certain amount of money to be loved and appreciated and full. So yeah. So Craig and I have conversations occasionally about religion, not super often, but we do. I find most of my inspiration and spirituality and connection with a higher power when I'm out hiking and alone and not with other people directly. I find that connection with going to breakfast on a Sunday morning and tipping the server, generously to make someone else's day. It's just a different way of giving and a different way of connecting.
I know she's being really deep right now, but honestly, we have actually turned our tithing into that. We have turned our tithing into going out and eating, and there's been times where we've tipped 60, 70%, just because we want to give that money back to someone in a caring way.
And not that we have it to give,
but
we would have been giving it
right
in some way otherwise if we were in a church building. And it's nice to feel that connection.
Feels great.
At least and again, like, doing that, at least you know where it's going, because you see the reaction sometimes. And then sometimes when you go to a church, you don't really know where it's going unless the church.
That's a whole other conversation.
Well, or you do know where it's going and it's not okay.
Yeah, one of the two.
So
yeah, I've been to many of my pastors' houses and they're very nice. So
I know good for it.
Some of them have convertibles. So Phil, if we could ask you, Phil, what have you learned since leaving the church building?
Well, I've been thinking about it since I got to go last. So, so I've learned to have empathy, which you would think going to church would teach you that. But like, even Misty brought it up, or it was maybe Steve, who said, like, when someone stands up in church and says something that they don't agree, then we go, they don't have the right, they should stand up. Like, what? like you always want to judge that person for doing something out of the ordinary or something like that. I've learned to just have empathy, like stepping in other people's shoes and understanding where they're coming from. You don't learn that aspect, and they kind of do by like convicting you to go on like a mission trip and showing you a really sad video of some poor children, because that always gets us going. So I've learned how to it's just, so I've learned how to be empathetic, which is I thought I always had, but like it was a very selfish empathy. It was only to favor myself. I've learned to actually have joy without a constant feeling of guilt, because church would often be every Sunday it's, if it's not the like fluffy sermon of just like, an altar call kind of thing where we hear, every few Sundays, like the more convicting ones are like, you're not tithing. If you're not tithing this much, you're losing out on all these blessings. And then, if, you've probably been looking at some porn, so you need to feel really bad about this week. There's this like constant, every week, there's something new for you to just like, I'm horrible. I need to just like fall on my knees every day. And just like this constant, like, I never felt like I had enough time to bask in the joy that I had of my relationship with God. It was always like, what's the next thing for me to feel guilty about, to work on, because, I'm a sinner and I'm just a piece of shit. Yeah. So what do I do next? And that's what church ended up feeling like over and over. Just come back every week, check in, make sure you're tithing. And now we're going to guilt trip you a little bit and make you feel more guilty that you're not serving more. And it was just, it was very toxic. And now that I've left that, it's like, wow, this is what joy feels like. This is what basking in God's like kind of joy, when you have a time when I gave a few bucks to somebody that was asking for money on the side of the corner, on the street corner. And I'm like, I hope I really helped that person. I didn't just immediately go, he's probably going to buy drugs with it, so why bother? Like, I don't know this person. Like, in like you guys like tipping, like I've also been doing this. I direct my tithes to actual people I meet that can benefit them. And it's actually been a lot more, I think, productive and helps people in the long run. And I know churches do help people, they do have those outreaches and stuff like that too. So, and just being able to, freely question and go through this process at my own pace, which is, I think, is very important, that churches don't encourage, is going through doubts at your own pace. They kind of want you to get through it a little bit quicker than you want to sometimes. Yeah. And it's never,
there's definitely no safe space at most churches.
Yeah, because your prayer group ends up usually turning into a gossip session, which I have a lot of trauma with prayer, because like when I tried to join this missions thing I was doing, or ministry I was trying to do a couple of years ago, and it's about a year ago now, they would do these like big prayer things. We all start praying at the end of this meeting and stuff. And like, I would never feel like praying. It was like a popcorn thing. And they kind of approached like, Phil, we just don't see you praying, in public a lot. I was like, well, I used to get like, told like I need to stop dating girls and stuff in high school. Like it would be like this pile on Phil fest during the prayer time. Like, oh, we pray for Phil. I know he's been idolizing women, and all, like, it was really odd, like passive aggressive stuff. So like, it's that kind of stuff that like, my prayer life feels productive. It feels beneficial to me and God. And it's not to kind of divulge these doubts and sins to someone else that's listening, because I always feel like there's a little bit of that. They kind of want to just hear where you're at through your prayer. And it's always kind of we say it's private and it's important to have your own time, but they really want you to do it at church, because
and vocally and out loud.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that was very long-winded.
Or on the connection card, and you'll never actually hear from them. But no, I think the listeners can probably hear us. Like, we all like miss, we all do. And if no one does, please say, but we all do miss the community of the church. Mm-hmm. We all enjoy the aspect of church. We're not trying to say, again, F the church completely. Like, we all miss that aspect of community in the church. I think we all just wish that the church would listen and hear that people are really suffering and hurting from the church's actions, or sometimes lack of actions. there's a lot that the church is just messing up on, and we just miss it. And we just wish that we were heard and things would drastically change or completely just dismantle in a way, just to reestablish, to be able to find again just the authentic love of Christ. And again, when I wrote my letter to the pastor of the church we were leaving, I said the reason why we're leaving is because we felt like the church was losing that authentic love of what the church used to be. And that, again, I think we all at one point probably felt that, of the love of Christ. And then as we see that politics kind of came in and kind of took over a lot of things within the church, it just sucked it in and just absorbed it.
I want to leave like a little tag at the end of some of that too. Of like, if you're questioning the church you're in now, like this is like a kind of a call to people who are listening, and you guys can reach out to us too. We'll usually tag our socials and stuff. Like if you're questioning the church you're in, that you don't feel like it's the right place for you, but you still feel like your walk with God is very vital and like you want to continue that, but you're just not sure this place. Don't equate your relationship with God to the church you're in. They don't have to go hand in hand. And if you feel like you need to step 100%. Back, if you feel like you need to step back to reevaluate what church needs to be for you, do it. Like it's going to be so like, yes, there's going to be some pushback from people there that are going to kind of reach out like, hey, look where you been and all this, like, and you can let them down like, hey, I'm just going through some things, I need to take some time. And they're really going to push you to like, well, like, yeah, but they want you to stay in the church because they're going to keep the influence. And it's important for them to keep their tithe income and their servers and all that stuff, people who are doing that. But don't feel like your relationship with God is more vital than your tithe and what you do at the church weekly. That church will find a new person eventually. Like the church will stay where it's at. Like the church isn't going anywhere. It might, but there's always another church to replace it. So
yeah, exactly.
I had to make that decision of like, my relationship with God is more important than my connection to this church or my attendance to this church. So
or not even just the church, my relationship with my family or my relationship with my friends and myself is more important than attending this church that's taking everything out of me. That's a good point. That was a good point, Phil. That was a good.
Yeah. I always want to prioritize your own personal relationship with God over other people's. And then when you have the ability to help other people's relationship with God, then that's when you take that time to do that. Like, don't feel like you have to also help other people's walks when they're struggling. Like if you got your mental space is all tied up with your own thing, just respectfully, like, hey, like I've got a lot going on. Like maybe like push them to someone who can help them. So reach out to us. Like I'm definitely willing to help talk to people who are thinking about leaving and what that looks like. And it's scary. It's scary to think about leaving the community. Like we've always reiterated that we miss the community, and it is tough to think like what is my life outside of a church, because we do put basically, I put about, probably 50 to 60% of my life into church, was just what I did there. And then the other half was work and, stuff with my wife and stuff. So like I had to figure out what am I going to fill that 60 to 50% of my life with now that I'm gone. So,
I mean, to be fully transparent, and we all agree, like, I think it's the biggest thing in the church is to be fully transparent. It's not easy. Like, it's not easy to leave your comfort of anything, especially leave the comfort of the church, because again, you have the family, you have the friends, you have your own personal ties that are so tied within that. But to leave sometimes, even just to take a break, if you're going kind of what Phil was saying, just you're going through something, just need to take a break. Sometimes it's worth that. If it's just to take a break to go to therapy to kind of discuss what you're going through, like it's so worth it. And let's say you can't get a therapist and you need to talk to someone. There's a lot of groups. If it's not even just us, like look on Instagram, just type in the hashtag deconstructing. You could find a podcast or somebody, a therapist that understands how to talk to you where you need to be met. So please just reach out to anybody, because it really is sometimes beneficial just to sometimes walk away for a second, take a breath, and then come back. But thank you.
I was gonna say the Deconstructing community has really adopted the social media aspect of community, and it's everywhere. So like you guys will 100% be able to find a space that's going to be able to help. I've found probably 3 or 4 new ones this week of people that are just like, I'm here to help. I've got a Discord. I've got this. I got all these things that if you need to reach out. So
if you need a place to start, the New Evangelical Facebook group or Instagram, they have a podcast as well. That's a good place to start. That's where I started. It's where I started to see that I was not alone. That's the biggest thing, is people sometimes feel alone. I did not feel alone once I went there. But thank you all for listening to our rants, our discussion on the church. I'm sure we can discuss this even longer because, again, the church is a huge topic, but was just a snippet of what we've all kind of just wanted to discuss a little bit about the church. So thank you for joining. Stay tuned.
Where can they find us, Stephen?
Oh, hey, if you want to find us, you can find us on Instagram at Meet Me at the Table Podcast. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. Just search our name, or anywhere you listen on podcasts. Again, just search Meet Me at the Table Podcast. You'll find us there. And again, you can just look for one of our names on one of our posts. Our own personal accounts will be there as well. Yep. Again,
we'll put our links and everything into the notes too, where people can get a hold of us if they need to, emails and stuff like that too. So.
Yep. Thank you all.
Okay. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.
See
you guys.